Hey my tech friends, thanks for stopping by. Please like and subscribe if you haven't already. Let's continue to grow this channel. Hope you guys enjoy this video.
Hey guys, welcome to another video where we focus on Xlite Edition. In today's Xlite Edition video, we're going to take a look at our configuration without the Defender antivirus installed. So this machine has no Defender implemented on it. And I'm curious from a functional standpoint if we see any gains in anything. Now keep in mind the MSMP engine.exe, which is your configuration for your antivirus and anti-spyware, anti-tamper protection, well, anti-tampering or tamper protection, is the service that runs in the background to actually do all those scans. And on average, that service uses about 256 megs in itself just to run. So it is a heavy service. So the question is this operating system actually smaller? Is it lighter weight than we would get with our configuration? And right off the bat, I can tell you, yes, it is. So it's quite a bit smaller. Generally speaking, we're going to require about 1.1 to 1.3 gigs of memory to run on a Windows 10 system with our Defender application installed. Now, without the Defender application installed, we're seeing about 800 megs, 839 megs specifically, of memory utilization at idle on a Windows 10 machine, which is phenomenal. But with that being said, do we actually gain performance on this system? So the bonus of not having the MSMP engine running is that we do have full control over whether or not we want scans running when we're, say, playing games or when we have large applications we're attempting to use running in the background. So we do have the option now to disable something that, or rather, we have something that doesn't exist, so we don't need to disable it. But in a vanilla version of Windows 10, we don't have the option to disable that service. You could disable the antivirus. You could disable the scanning function, but you can't disable that service. It still runs in the background. Now, since we don't have that running anymore, we already know that in our previous attempt with the Xlite system, that Windows Firewall was Swiss cheesed out, so the ports were all open for the connection. It'll be interesting to see in our nessus scan with this particular operating system. Do we see changes in our scan? Do we see more issues, less issues? Is the firewall configuration still intact? Do we have problems with the operating system from a security standpoint without the antivirus? Because keep in mind, Windows XP didn't have an antivirus. Windows 7 didn't have an antivirus. But both of those systems out of the box with the configuration and all updates. I mean, no like modifications, no changes, no cracks to the system, no hacks, just out of the box configuration, Windows updates applied. Windows 7 is more secure than Windows 10 is, out of the box configuration. Again, we're not talking, adding registry changes. We're not talking adding port configuration changes. We're not talking locking down UDP or TCP port communication and using the firewall as our security. We're talking just the operating system with all the updates applied. Windows 7, even to this day, 3 years no updates, 4 years no updates, still is more secure than our Windows 10 system with all the updates. And that's running a nessus scan against them, defining in the nessus scan that both machines are running Windows 11 with the latest patch revision. So it'll scan for ports and open and configuration issues inside the Windows 7 operating system, but it doesn't see them because they just don't exist in the Windows 7 operating system. They exist in Windows 10, they exist in Windows 11, so Windows 10 and Windows 11 out of the box look worse on paper from a security standpoint than Windows 7 does even after 4 years of no support. So what is this operating system going to look like? I think before we get ahead of ourselves, we should start to take a look around. Let's take a look at our firewall configuration and see if we actually have one intact on this operating system. Because we do say that we have things turned on, but do we actually have things functional? Now, interestingly enough, everything seems to still be intact as far as the firewall is concerned. And also, maybe not so interesting, is that we still have our configuration intact for a base bare bones machine. So basically, all the ports are still open for functions that don't exist or necessarily exist in this operating system. And the reason why I say that is because the OS itself is small. So there's definitely portions of the OS missing, but we don't have the firewall configured where things are trimmed out. So we'll probably have to run our script against this system first, or maybe after we run our initial nessus scan, and then close out all these port configurations and see if that changes our outcome as far as our scan is concerned. Something else I want to do with this Windows operating system is fix the Windows update process and actually install all the updates on the system and then run the scan against it again without the Defender application present to see if it competes or compares with our out-of-the-box Windows 10 system. Because one of the bonuses of this operating system without the Defender application is that there's no Defender application. To undo or remove the Defender application from a vanilla version of Windows 10 is not fun. It's not something you necessarily want to tackle, especially since this already exists. So if that's the selling point of the operating system, is to not use the Defender application, this is your better option than trying to dissect the Defender application out of your vanilla version of Windows 10. Because even if you disable it, as far as the scan function is concerned, that MSMP engine exe file still pumps in the background in your task manager, and it doesn't really give you any bonus to removing it. Whereas this actually stripped that service out of the operating system. I mean, we don't see it running. I mean, it's just simply gone. So with that said, this is the better option, all things considered, than going vanilla Windows 10 if you don't want the Defender application running. And it does make a difference in the performance aspect, which is a first, at least in these videos, to see. Possibly the most ironic thing, though, is the fact that we still see Defender Firewall. So the system still thinks that the Defender application in some way, shape, or form is still applied. And I'm guessing that if we go into our configuration in our control panel, actually, let's go into settings. Settings is a better place for us to start with this. Let's go into settings and then take a look at our security. So we're completely stripped. So we have no security configuration whatsoever as far as integration with our Defender firewall. So the firewall, at least on this particular machine, likely will block the ports, but likely also won't scan them to make sure that we don't get any kind of intrusion crap sent in. Okay, so that answers the question for the firewall. Let's see what else we got going on here. Let's go into our add remove programs here and see what we got installed. Just the basics so far based off of the Xlite package. Still don't understand why we have IE11 installed on these systems. It doesn't make any sense as to why you would make the system reduced in size and then install IE11. I guess it's probably because we don't have Microsoft Edge installed and they want to give you a default browser so that way you could actually access the outside the web. But I doubt anybody's going to run that. More than likely, people are just going to grab a thumb drive off a different machine and put, Firefox or Chrome on it and run that. Everything else that's in here looks pretty standard. Obviously, we have the Defender application, unchecked or disabled. So we're just going to hit OK for the time being. And what we're going to do now is we're going to set this thing up so we can run a scan on it initially to see what we get back without doing any changes. Okay, so I figured while that thing is actually running the scan, what I could show you is on the vanilla version of Windows 10, our Defender configuration. So if we go into Task Manager here, and we go to Details, that's going to be our Defender application. As you can see, right now we're using about 180 megs in idle process just to run it. And every time I open an application, that's going to spike. Every time I close an application, that's going to spike, because the real-time virus scan will run in the background. Now, you could disable it with group policy. You could disable it with configuration changes in the operating system. But you can't remove it as far as that SMP engine. So even if you disable the scanner from scanning, that still runs in the background. It still chews resources. So let's take a look at what it looks like when we actually go in here and we do make the changes on it. So let's go over to Update and Security and Windows Security and Virus and Threat Protection. And we go to Manage Settings, turn off real-time protection, turn off the cloud delivery, turn off the tamper protection. So none of these things are running anymore, but you'll notice this is still running. So I mean, you know, it's reduced in size by 7 megs, 8 megs, but it's still there. So it still runs even with the antivirus disabled on the GUI. So I know what you guys are thinking then. Why don't we just remove it? We saw it in the other system, on the Xlite system, under our add remove programs and our turn Windows features on and off. And if we scroll down here, we can see we don't have that option. It's not checked, it's not unchecked, it's not removable. So at that point, we're in a situation where even with it disabled in our vanilla version of the operating system, it still runs, so you can't actually trim the fat of the operating system. And then you think to yourself, well, why don't we just disable the service? Why don't we stop the service from running? So you could go to services and you could right click on it. You could choose to stop, but you're not allowed to stop it. You don't have options to stop it. So then you could say, all right, well, if we go to details and maybe if we go to open the file location and say, let's rename this and put a 2 on the end of it. Now we don't have an option to do that. Now we could take ownership of the file and actually change this, I'm sure. Or we could use like an unlocker application to attempt to change this and remove it, I'm sure. And then probably go through the process of deleting the whole thing out of the operating system. But quite frankly, at that point, you'd be better off running the Xlite system without the Defender application installed. It would just be a better option, and then just reinstall all the updates and reinstall the operating system to the full version if you really wanted to. Because the problem is this MP engine here is heavy. I mean, it just is. It just chews resources all day long, and the more crap you open, the slower it gets because the more resources it chews. So from a gaming perspective, if you're gaming on your system and this service is running, every single time that game launches a new screen or a new change or a new something where it's pulling or calling different files in the actual application, this stupid thing will run. So you think, all right, well, I can add it as an exclusion so it doesn't scan that location. And you can, but the real-time protection is going to see the hooks in the different parts of the operating system or the different drivers that are activated, and it's still going to scan it. So it's a heavy application. It actually reminds me a lot of Norton Antivirus back in the early 2000s, because Norton Antivirus, you would install it on your Pentium 4 system, and it would basically turn your state-of-the-art Pentium 4 system into a boat anchor. Okay guys, so looking into this now, we have this completed. This is our Xlite 10 system with no Defender. If we drill down into this, we have 63 infos and 1 medium. Now, this is double the amount of bad that the Xlite 10 system was with Defender, but I expected us to see worse scores since we don't have the Defender platform and the system is scanning for that stuff. So I'm expecting to see that. Again, we also have Swiss cheese firewall configuration still on the system, and we have a bunch of configuration problems that need to be really rectified prior to us running the next scan. So let's go back into the operating system. Let's trim out some of that fat. Let's fix the security from the authentication perspective. Let's fix the security by adding our scripts that we wrote for the previous OS on here. Let's remove Internet Explorer. Let's make sure we have like Firefox or something installed on this thing. And let's go back into this thing and take another scan. Okay guys, so we have the Firefox installer moved over and we have our scripts. So we have the ability now to kind of hunker down and clean this thing up. So let's start at the stuff that doesn't require the scripts first and go into our computer manager. Now, if you guys want extended details on how to do all this stuff and what these scripts do, feel free to watch the project video. I'll add that into the description, and take a look at the initial configuration on our other Xlite systems as well as Ghost systems, where we run through the actual scripting process and configuration lockdown and fixes of these operating systems. Again, I'll put all the descriptions down in the, or rather, I'll put the links in the description so you guys could check them out. Okay, so we created a new account. It's basically the standard account that I use on these test videos. So we have our standard account created. It's an admin, the administrator account. We just got to go through all these things and set these passwords that say never expire to not never expire. And we're going to log out and log back into this thing as our Tor account. So let's close this window. Okay, so we're back in. We just booted. We get the prompt to let us know that we have to reconfigure our starters back. So, I mean, again, stuff that just whatever. Okay, great. It's fine. So we're back in the system now. We have, we're accessing through our Tor account. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go back into computer management. Local users and groups, users, and we're going to delete our admin account. And there we go. We're all set now. So we're logged into our Tor account. Our administrator account is disabled. That's fine. Great. Okay, so next what we're going to do is we have to remove Internet Explorer. But I'm not going to do that in the traditional way because I wrote all those scripts. So basically what we're going to do now is we're just going to go into our scripting. And we're going to run this as admin. I forgot there's no UAC turned on. We have to fix the UAC first, which is a secondary script in here. It's right here. Okay, so I just tested it. UAC is now resolved, but still having issues accessing our PowerShell as admin. So what we're going to do here is we're going to just open up PowerShell as admin. Maybe we're not. All right, let's try that. There we go. So we can run it as admin. Something's weird with that actual shell configuration on the system that doesn't allow certain right clicks to work. I'm not entirely sure why, but it's just bizarre. So with that said, let's take a look now and see if we could run the rest of our configuration here. You know, I'm having problems now running our PowerShell scripts in this operating system, which didn't exist in our previous version of Xlite. So I'm wondering if it has something to do with that stupid start menu change here. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to Control Panel, Category View, uninstall a program, and remove this Start as Back application. Okay, so it's gone. Yeah, so now it works fine. There's something screwy with that Start as Back application. So I'm going to be honest with you. I've had really terrible luck with any of those things that change the start menu. Now, I understand why it exists in Windows 11 because the start menu is god-awful in Windows 11. But in Windows 10, honestly, it's really not that bad just from the factory. So I would just roll with the Windows 10 start menu configuration and get rid of that Start as Back junk because it just, you know, if you can't right-click on things to run them as admin, and you need to have the UAC turned on in order for certain functions of Windows to work, which is true, I don't see a point in running it. It's just, it makes your functionality, your usability of the operating system worse. So now that that's fixed, let's go back in here and try to run these scripts. Okay, so to save some time, what I did is I just combined all of our command line stuff into one script. So we're just going to run this as admin. Okay, so that completed. So that combines all of our batch scripts in here into a single script. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to run through the PowerShell configuration, which is just going to be the Windows cleanup. We're going to fix the execution policy. And we're going to fix the Windows firewall configuration. So we have a combo firewall fix for the Xlite and Go system. So we'll run that as well. Okay, so basically our configuration is such, which is we have to set our execution policy so that way we can run the scripts. So I'm going to do yes to all. Great, we have our execution policy set. Now we have to go through the DISM commands to actually fix these. So we're just F8. So we're going to Control C because I don't want to reboot after every single one of these stupid things. Okay, so that completes our DISM commands. Then we're going to go through and add our firewall configuration to the actual system. So we're just going to F5 to run the whole thing as one script. There's going to be a bunch of stuff down here that's going to fail because there's stuff that exists as a certain name in certain operating systems and as another name in another operating system, and then yet another name in the vanilla operating system. And it's all combined into one script, so only a third of it works on every single operating system. But it doesn't cause any issues. It just can't find the actual rule name because it doesn't exist from one system to the other. And I wasn't going to go through all these things and itemize them out because it was just completely pointless. So all this information, though, is in the Git repository. You could grab these scripts from there. They exist in there. So if you want to copy them over to your Ghost system or your Xlite system and run them to save you the time, go for it. If you want to run them on your vanilla system, you could do that too. Okay, so that completes our configuration. So our configuration's done. I'm going to close this. We can say no to all that. We have our scripts. Great. Close the other PowerShell window. We can close our command line windows or our Notepad documents out. And we're going to restart this system. Okay, so our Windows operating system is now booting back up. And we're back into Windows. Let's take a look to see if we've done anything from a performance standpoint. Oh, we're right about the same thing. So once all of this stuff, once all of the OS loads, we should be right around the same amount of size. Okay, guys, so we just finished our scan again on the system. And just to recap, so our scan beforehand is 63 infos and 1 medium. We ran those scripts on our system and we fixed our user accounts. And as you can see now, we have 37 infos. So it's still not as good as your out-of-the-box Windows 10 system, but keep in mind that we're missing security features, we're missing Windows updates. Quite frankly, if we ran the updates and we fixed the security issues, we would have the full-blown operating system back, at which point, obviously, we would get a lower number because we're expecting patches and certain files and certain revisions that don't exist in the operating system. Now, I've reviewed the information that was in our 37 that was found as far as our infos are concerned, and from what I could tell, we don't really have anything in there from a configuration standpoint that would be part of the operating system still and would be something that I would call a security issue or risk. I think the total number, if we actually trim the fat out of the actual scan for things that are false positives, things that don't exist in the operating system any longer, we're probably looking at anywhere between 8 and 11 actual infos versus the 37 we see here, which is actually excellent for an operating system. I actually think that this operating system does better with the scripting configuration than our Xlite full version did. Now, the reason why I say that 8 to 11 on this particular operating system, all fat trimmed out of the actual false positives that are in our scan, is better than our other system is, keep in mind, our other system had 11 after the fat was trimmed out of the actual scan. But this system is missing the Defender application, so we don't have the additional security configurations in here. And to be able to meet the other scan configuration tells me that either A, our other Xlite system that does have the Defender application installed doesn't work right, or B, this particular operating system is just as secure because of the lack of additional features or functions. So in other words, we don't have the Defender application in here, so we don't have that scanner, right? So we would remove that as a notification because we know that that exists. That's on purpose. That's done by design. And if we can match the numbers from one system to the other, and the other system has it, without having to trim that number out of the other system, that would really get about the same number. So all things considered, this is actually pretty secure for a system that doesn't have an antivirus. I mean, you got to take into consideration the last operating systems that didn't have antiviruses were Windows 7 and Windows XP. And while Windows 7 is still more secure than XP and this will ever be, it's, by design, Windows 10 and Windows 11, they watch you. They have software built into the systems, and they are an invasion of privacy. And when you sign up for it, you sign the terms of service that basically allows them to monitor you. And if you don't like that, you don't think that's a good function or a good feature, and you don't enjoy it, then Linux is your option, especially if you want a modern operating system. If not, you can continue to use Windows 7, but you're going to have to jump through hoops to do it. And quite frankly, it may not be worth it anymore. At this point, if you want the security, you'd probably be better off running a fully up-to-date version of Linux. Now, I emphasize the fully up-to-date because there are security risks in the older versions that have been found. So a fully up-to-date Linux system is going to not only be faster than your Windows system is, it's going to be more secure than Windows system is. And at this point, there's really not too much that Linux system can't do that your Windows system can do, with the exception of maybe playing DOS-based games or old school Windows-based games. And I understand there's emulators for Linux, but they just don't work as good as being on the physical hardware. So I think that's the first of our videos here for our Xlite non-Defender Windows 10 system. Thanks for sticking around, guys.